Today is Thursday, November 8, 2012, and we are interviewing Mr. Leo Traister at Manual Academy. Mr. Traister is 93 and having been born, you were born September 9th?
September 9th, 1919.
1919? Okay. My name is Naimber Griffin. Also we have...
Son, Adriana, co-chair.
And I'm a senior at Manual Academy.
I'm a junior. I'm also a junior.
I'm a senior.
Okay, could you state for the recording what war and branch of service you served in?
Well, I was in the United States Army Air Force. It was Army Air Force at that time. And I served, what'd you ask?
What branch
I
and what war did you serve in?
was in World War II.
World War II, okay. And what was your rank?
I was discharged as a tech sergeant.
Okay, and also where did you serve?
Pardon me?
Where did you serve?
You want to overseas? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
Well, I served in the, for a year and a half in the CBI theater. And that's in China, Burma, India. And I spent most of my time in Burma.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so where were you born?
I was born in Sterling, Illinois.
Sterling? Okay, I've heard of that place.
Well, I should think so. Actually, I grew up in Rock Falls, Illinois, but I was born in Sterling.
Did you have any other siblings or relatives or parents that were in the war?
No.
So you were the first of, that is really neat. How many sisters and brothers do you have?
I have two sisters. I did have two sisters and no brothers.
Okay, no brothers. And okay, were you drafted or enlisted?
I was drafted.
Okay. How did you feel when you got drafted?
Well, it happened so fast. Actually, I had just finished my sophomore year in college, and I went home in June, and in July I was called up. So it was less than a month. In July 1941.
Where was the training camp that you attended, and how was it? Like, how was the experience?
Well, I was a little bit of an exception. The fact that I had 2 years of college made me a different person in the military at that time, really. And I never did pull basic training. I immediately went to work. My first duty that I had even as a private was to organize a physical fitness program for the outfit that I had been assigned to. And I had to do that for two groups, the permanent party and for the students. I finished that and went to the next squadron, and I did the same thing, organize a fitness program, but a much, much larger organization. And at that organization, I remained until on that job until I finished organizing and put together teams to administer the program, and then I was assigned the responsibility of putting together a program, recreational program for Chinook Field. Which is no longer in existence, I guess you're aware of that, at Grand Tool, Illinois. And we put together two conferences, I guess you would call it. We had 20 squadrons, and put together two conferences, and I was helped organize the activities in which they would be involved in. And then we put together a committee to administer the program. After that, I was called in. I said I was told I was going to be reassigned. I said, you mean I haven't done my work well? And he said, no, you're out of work. So I was appointed a sergeant, a supply sergeant. And I told him I have no idea what this includes. They said, well, you had 2 years of college, don't you? I said, yes, sir. Said, then this will be a piece of cake. And so I ended up a supply sergeant. and where I remained until I was transferred to Harlingen, Texas, where I was assigned the responsibility of putting together a new program, which was really a change in which they had hoped to make in the processing people before they go overseas. And so I was involved in putting together there was 2 places in the country that did this, and we were one. And after I finished that, I was sent to Bangor, Maine, where I was waiting a reassignment, and they sent me to New York City, to a hotel in New York City, where I studied supply lines, supplying units and that sort of thing, and the logistical problems that one would encounter. And so that, I went to school there, classes there, and then they called me in, and I flew to, ultimately ended up in Casablanca, and I waited reassignment there. From Casablanca, I went to Tripoli. Rommel had just bombed us when we landed, so we didn't even fire down. We just refueled and took off to Cairo. And I left Cairo. Actually, I won't go into that part in Casablanca.
It's fine.
Well, I was scheduled to fly out on an 8:30 flight, and I wanted the 8 o'clock flight. And they said, you can't take that flight, it's going to Italy, you're going to, the next stop will be India, really. So I had no choice, and waited before we started to aboard. The 8 o'clock took off, and I don't think it was off the ground 50 feet, and it just blew up. And so I missed it the first time that way. It was sabotaged. And so I left Cairo and also had a mishap and went down east of Tel Aviv. And then the British picked us up, took us to Tel Aviv, where I made, and then I ultimately ended up in Karachi, where I went from there and then into the Burma area. I was assigned into an RAF base, Royal Air Force. And from there I spent most of my time out of that site, supplying in China mostly and Burma. And it was mostly much bombing raids were taken off from our area. So we kept tried to keep those people flying with some degree of consistency at least. And I remained there then until the big bomb was dropped, and I was relieved of all duties. But I couldn't. I had to wait until the replacement came in so I could help them know where they're going to go to dismantle. And then I came home by way of ship, which I could have avoided. I took 22 days on board ship to get home, and then I was discharged on the 3rd of January, 1946.
So
That
that's
pretty much covers it, I think. I don't particularly want to go into any more than that, but
okay, you don't have to. We will definitely move on. So, how was it adapting to the military, like personal experience?
you mean when I first went in?
Yeah.
Well, it was peacetime, and I must confess it. The military wasn't bad. I really I was in peacetime from, well, July, August, September, October, November, 5 months before Pearl Harbor. So I had some experience in peacetime service, and I didn't think it was bad. I kind of enjoyed it. I guess maybe I had an easy job, but, you know, we'd just start at 8 o'clock in the morning and off at 11 at noon and back at 1 and off at 4:30. Wednesday afternoon we had off, Saturday afternoon, Sunday, after we had off, till Monday morning. It wasn't bad, I must confess. I will say this, if each or any of you are interested in military in any sense, the more education you can get, the better satisfied you'll be in the military. And you will find your service will be far more interesting than if you don't pursue the education. I believe that. Of course, I've taught and coached for 44 years, so I suppose you're saying he would naturally say that, but I'm saying it very seriously. Education is a big plus for an individual in the military service.
So does that mean they get put up to
Well, I think
rank?
just as a quick example, I, like everybody else, make mistakes, I suppose, but I was almost instantly called in and asked to join the cadet program. They call it cadets at that time, the pilots.
Mm.
And I passed everything except the sight. I lacked the ability to depth, and that was almost an instant loss right there. Everything else would have been easy. And of course it might have been the beginning of my problem anyway, because I'm legally blind now. So it might have been the start then. Right after that I was called in and asked to go to OCS, officers training, and I put in my application. And one question on there asked for my mother's maiden name, which I put down, then semicolon, relationship. Well, I already said that's my father, so I didn't fill it. I got it back incomplete, military. And I never turned it back in. And that was a mistake. But be that it may. So again, that was because of my education. That was why I had those two approaches almost immediately when I went in.
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends?
Pardon me?
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends?
I still didn't understand you.
How did you stay in touch with your family and friends?
Well, mostly just by, well, at that time I could get you get a 3-day vacation, and I would come back. I had been a member of a fraternity when I was in college, and so I would come back to the fraternity and visit my friends. Because I was at Chanute Field and I was at Eureka College at that time.
What fraternity was you in?
Pardon me?
What fraternity was you in?
I still didn't understand you.
What fraternity were you in?
Lambda Chi Alpha. Are you familiar with that?
Not exactly.
Lambda Chi Alpha. No.
So what, you said land, what was the fraternity called once again?
Lambda Chi Alpha.
What made you decide to join that fraternity?
Well, when I was a freshman, or going on campus as a freshman, they have what they call a rush week, I suppose. And you have this fraternity, which was Tau Kappa Epsilon, and this fraternity, which is Psi Alpha Lambda, Theta Kappa Nu, and so on. And the upperclassmen, they start checking you out. And first thing you know, one's talking to you, and the next thing you know, he's holding on to you. And I guess it just was by accident, I'll put it that way. I had no idea. I'd never heard of such a thing as a fraternity when I went on campus, especially to SAM.
What university did you go to?
Pardon me?
What university did you go to?
What university did you attend?
Well, I graduated from Eureka College. And then I had my advanced work and graduated from the University of Illinois. I picked up my master's at the university, and then I have others, which is unimportant really.
What'd you do on your first day when you returned home from being released from the
When I
drug?
was discharged,
Yeah.
well, I better not tell you. I guess the first thing, I think went out on a party, to be honest about it. And met and reacquainted a lot of people that I had lost acquaintance with over the years. But I think probably that's about it. I think that's probably what, I imagine that's probably what each veteran would attempt to do, is go out and party. And see, I wasn't married then. You had to check the girls out.
So you're pretty excited to be back.
Even though I wasn't married, but I was engaged. So, but we didn't get married right away then.
How long were you in the service?
4.5 years,
That's a long time.
long enough.
Were you happy to did you miss it once you were discharged? Like, would you ever want to go back after?
Well, there were periods of time, when I first got out, they asked me if I had been recommended for a master sergeant. And then the war, they dropped the bomb, and and it had been approved, but they were all frozen. And then when it came time when I got back into the States, the first thing they tried to do is see if you wouldn't re-up. And they said they'd guarantee I'd get master if I would re-up. I said, no way. Then they started in on a reserve, and they would guarantee I would get the promotion. But by that time I was ready to, and I knew I was going to finish college, and I knew I was ultimately going to get married, and so I just rejected both.
Do you regret rejecting those?
There have been periods of times when I think maybe I would have had it to do over again. I would have at least gone into reserves.
You keep mentioning drop the bomb. What is that referring to?
Well, when we were notified that it had been, we didn't know until afterwards, but when we were notified, we were really quite elated, militarily speaking, I guess you put it that way. I know that it's a controversial issue. But from a military standpoint, it saved thousands and thousands and thousands of American lives. And it also saved thousands and thousands of Americans from being, well, mutilated, I guess, injured. And for that reason, and that reason alone, I personally, in my own feeling, justified the dropping of the bomb, because we weren't the culprit that started this whole thing anyway. The Japanese started at Pearl Harbor in 1941. And so I know that it's difficult to imagine dropping a bomb on civilians. And it makes you think maybe it wasn't justified, but it was a way of saving American lives. So that had to be your choice. If I would have been a civilian, I suppose I'd look at it differently.
What did you guys do, like, when you took breaks and you didn't have to work? Like, what are some fun things you and your friends were able to do while you were drafted in the service?
You mean when you had time off?
Yes, that's...
Well, you might go to,
She's smiling.
well, you might go to PX, the beer garden. And then, if you left the post, like we might, depending on where you were, like when I was at Chanute, you could go to Peoria and to Bloomington, and so forth.
Someone mentioned that their squad used to sing like songs. Did you guys have any special traditions that the soldiers and your got to do?
Not per se, really, but there were songs that they would sing that were strictly military songs.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it is a way of making activities which you're involved in easier, I think. It's simply, even when I was coaching, and I coached football most of the time, and if we would send them out across country, we'd have them sing, even football ball club at the college level. And that makes it easier to get around than to puff and wheeze away without saying anything. It's amazing, but it can get you through some different difficulties.
How long were you a football coach?
42 years.
42 years. Some of the schools, were you in?
Well, I started out in high school, and I was at a high school level for 8 years, and I was a principal at high school for 3 years, senior high school, and that was up near the Rock Island area. And then I had at a commencement, I had the CEO from Eureka College, or the president from Eureka College, as my commencement speaker, and that was on a Friday, and on a Tuesday, I was in my office kind of putting odds and ends together, and I had a call from you wanting to know if I'd come down and talk. And so I said, I can always come down and talk. And I went down the next day, and before the day was over, I had a meeting at 10 o'clock with him, and by 2:30, I had been hired to come to Eureka College. And I remained then at Eureka College for almost, in a number of different capacities, for almost 28 years.
Did you ever play football, or you were just?
I played 8 years of football.
Oh, okay, that's.
That's why I hobbled in. I played 4 years of high school, 4 years of college.
Oh, that's neat. Do you have any, what's it called? Like, what's the word? Souvenirs that you kept from anywhere, like today?
You mean from the military?
Mm-hmm.
Not a whole lot, no. I did bring some, and I have given them, I have 2 lovely daughters,
Mm-hmm.
and I gave them pretty much what I had. I had nothing really, other than my uniform, which I thought maybe I'd put on when I was asked to talk at a Rotary program, and I pulled the blouse out, and I took the emblems off. I was going to have it cleaned, so I thought, well, I'll put it on, and the only thing I could get on was my right sleeve. The military used inferior cloth in those days, and it shrunk.
I know that was.
I probably weighed 160 pounds when I was in the service overseas. And by this time, I weigh a little more than that, of course. I weigh now about what I played football at, really. I was a running back, halfback.
Oh. Have you contacted any veterans over the years that you were with?
A few, but not a whole lot.
Do you still talk to them today? As in, like.
No, not really. I don't know if there's that many of us left, really. Not in World War II. But I do speak and have calls to speak with a lot of my former football players, ball players, That's a nice plus.
Were you in these special organizations?
Well, I don't know if Rotary is a special organization. You mean, is that what you're talking about, like Rotary Club?
Okay, can you explain a little what Rotary Club is?
Well, it's a club to support the community in many ways. For example, you would make available, help the library or hospital or some parts of the hospital, or it's just to help.
Volunteering.
Well, it didn't volunteer. Yeah, I'm talking about in terms of money. To help them when they need things and stuff like that.
Oh, okay, that's neat. How did the experience of wartime affect your life? Either in while you were in the service or afterwards? Like what you've learned or what you've experienced, been through. How's that today? How are you today from the whole experience?
Well, I think probably I realized how fortunate one can be. Well, how fortunate one can be to live in this country, really, for one. Until you've been some other places and see how other people live and are forced to live and have to live, and then how fortunate we are in this country to live and, as we do and have what we have, and unfortunately don't appreciate it in many cases. That's kind of discouraging. But someday they may realize that if they were someplace else, it would be a whole new way of life. For example, when I was in the areas where I was, average life expectancy was 27 years. If you lived to be 27 years old, you had lived a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And we just think what we have. There isn't the food that you will eat this noon, and I don't know what it'll be, but there isn't enough food in the world to give everybody that lives in this world that same amount of food that you will eat. We're pretty fortunate and don't appreciate it.
I understand what you mean, because a lot of people aren't really grateful of what they have until they actually experience it. And that's why when I was in JRTC, I think we've learned a lot, like leadership and, how discipline, things like that. So I truly understand and can relate to what you're saying about.
Where was your favorite place you visited?
Oh, worldwide?
Yes.
Maybe Calcutta, India. It's just unbelievable. They have area. I flew over and circled the Taj Mahal. You're all aware of the Taj Mahal, aren't you? One of the 7 wonders of the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely magnificent. And I don't suppose there's even a price tag on it. It's with all of the gold, silver, jewelry and everything in it. It's and in a country where people just starve to death. I can remember one time going through. I flew into and I stayed in Calcutta for a little while. You get up in the morning and there's just bodies all over. They're dead. They just starved to death. Thousands. I'm not talking about 1 or 2. I'm talking about thousands. And yet there are halls there and temples there that are immaculate and spotless. And then other parts of it just absolutely filthy. And the money that goes into these could very well support some of these people that are starving to death, I suppose. And anyway, It's sort of fascinating about Penny. It's a huge, huge, huge city. Ride around in a rickshaw. You've read a rickshaw, haven't you? Sit in a little old two-wheel job and a man pulls you around.
Oh, okay.
That's a means of transportation in many ways. And, but it's a sort of a fascinating place.
And how long were you there?
I wasn't very long you mean in the Calcutta area?
Yes.
No, I was never very long there. I went back there, through there, flew through there. And so you wouldn't be there very long at any given time unless you would take a time. But I was mostly on east of there yet. And I spent much of my time with, like I mentioned, I was with the Royal Air Forces. Even though I was with the Royal Air Force, we did not communicate very much with the English. They were over there. We sort of more or less took over because that was a sort of a flyout for supplying the areas where we had B-25s and B-24s and B-17s and B-29s in this area, set up for bombing range mostly. And then we had to supply General Chennault in China with the Flying Tigers. You probably have read of those people too.
What's the Flying Tigers?
Flying Tigers, that's what they call their planes.
Oh.
Have you ever-
They had them painted, how you've seen pictures where everybody would paint a plane, some pretty girl sometimes. But theirs was a plane at the front end that had a great big mouth with a lot of teeth hanging on it. They called themselves the Flying Tigers.
Have you ever flown a plane?
I flew a lot, but I never flew a plane. I couldn't qualify to go to school for it.
Were you guys' planes ever decorated? Like, did you have a special theme to yours?
No.
Just-
Most of the plane I flew on was a C-47. It wasn't even armed. When we'd fly, we'd have support, but we were armed.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time we just carried a .45 automatic, but we had carbines on the plane. But if we would be flying a supply line, we would have to have air support, mostly P-38s, or we wouldn't make it. Yes. But our planes were not armed.
Did you ever receive any rewards?
Oh, nothing very substantial, I guess.
When you came back, when you were discharged, how did you readjust to your civilian life?
Pardon me?
How did you readjust to your civilian life when you were discharged?
Well, it was quite difficult. I came back in, like I said, I got out the 3rd of January, and then March 24th, I was married, and then in April, I resumed college, and I really had a lot of difficulty, not because of the marriage, but I was very nervous and I had a great deal of difficulty being able to just sit down and study and prepare for the class the next day. And it took a long time for me to get to the point where I could feel comfortable and not something upset me pretty easily. And so I think it was very difficult for a new wife to have to adjust to, but she was very understanding. And more or less got me through it, I guess, is a way to put it. But no, it was not easy to just settle down to normal life, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Did it take like months?
Oh, it took months.
Did you receive any wounds or injuries when you was in the war?
Not per se. No.
How was it like being in the war? I know it's like scary, but like,
Well, ultimately, I guess you adjust to most anything if you have to. It's amazing. You will probably early in arrival in there, you'll look up a chaplain to get you through some of the things. I tell you, the best way to describe it, and let it go at that, if anyone ever tells you, and they were in certain areas of the military, and they tell you they were not afraid, they were liars, or they weren't in an area where they had to be afraid. Everybody's afraid, and you learn fear, what real fear is, I guess, and I don't need to go any further than that.
okay. I was thinking about joining the Air Force.
Well, you can't go wrong. You're all right.
Is there any special tips or comments I should be prepared for training?
I don't think I can help you on that because it's been so long since I was really involved. And today versus today, the only thing I've already iterated is that the more education you can get, not because I'm an educator, just because I experienced it militarily myself, the more education you get and you go into the military, the more successful you will be. I don't know any other way to say it.
Okay, thank you. What foods, like what was your favorite foods at the time? Like did you get to experience different like cultural?
Well, I tell you, it isn't K rations. And it isn't C rations. which you, I don't know if they still serve those two. You know what K rations are like, don't you?
Like the powdered egg they have.
Well, it looks like a Cracker Jack box, only a little bigger. And then it will be a little round can. And it has a little key, you open it up, and it might be for breakfast. There'll be scrambled egg in there. Then you have a little wooden paddle, and you eat that cold. And then there'll be a biscuit all wrapped up in there. And it's real hard. And you eat it, it doesn't digest very fast, so you're not hungry. You haven't consumed much, but you're not hungry. And then there was a little teeny bag of peanuts in there that was kind of like dessert, I suppose. And I don't know now, probably not now anymore, but then there was 4 cigarettes in there. And at noon, it would be much the same thing, except when you open the can, it might be Spam. You spread that on your biscuit. And at night, it might be a little bitty Vienna sausages. That's K rations. C rations is stew. Open up a big can, dump it in a big old garbage can under a fire. And when I arrived overseas and got ready to eat, they were using native Indians to stir it. you know, they'd build a fire and put the can on it, dump it in there, and it's a garbage can, really. And they'd be stirring and sweating in it. And you don't get hungry for a while. After a while, it's either that or nothing. But it's just an old beat up stew. You just dump in your mess kit. You go someplace sit down and eat it. And that was not a favorite lunch. In the States, though, they feed us pretty well. It's called garrison rations in the States. Overseas, you're on what they call field rations. And so, where I was, I don't know how it is in others at that time, but when I was there, for example, you'd get, overseas, you'd get 2 cans of beer a month if you drink beer. Not everybody drinks beer, of course, but those are people you always try to find and befriend them, and so that you would have 4 instead of 2. But that's all you would get, like something like that. And as an officer, they would get 1/5 of a Southern Comfort a month. But in the States, you would eat quite well. For breakfast, you'd have scrambled eggs, bacon or sausage, fried potatoes, toast, different kinds of drinks that you want. And for lunch, you'd have, sometimes you get steak, which I wasn't quite used to. Where I come from, I came from a very poor family. Mm-hmm. My folks didn't have anything. And I went to college on my ability to play football, or I wouldn't have been able to go. And after I came back from the service, I finished on the GI Bill. But my dad never even finished 7th grade, let alone 8th grade. So I knew what it was like not to have too much. You got to appreciate what you have.
Mm-hmm. Did you keep like a personal diary or journal?
For a while. But after a while, you just don't have to, when you're overseas, you just don't have time to do that. But when I first went in, I did. I thought I was doing a great deed to myself. But I think, no, I'll put it for me.
Do you still have that journal where you used to write?
I still have what?
That journal where you used to write it?
I still didn't understand you.
Do you still have that journal that you used to write in? You don't?
No. No.
You said that you used to go home on the frats. Besides that, did you have were you able to send mail home or receive mail?
Well, you would receive mail, but not regularly. But when they would catch up with you, then there would be, you didn't have mail call every day, no. But when you reach a certain point, you had one point was you were out most of the time, much of the time you were gone from your base much of the time. But when my base, like I said, I was based with a RAF base, and actually that was at a place called, I hate to even say it, but Dum Dum. And the village was kind of close to that. And so when you got back, there would be mail for you, if it caught up with you. You didn't get a lot of mail. I don't know how much mail other people got. I never did get very much mail, or letters. When you wrote letters, letters that came into you would be censored. And in a letter that I would write, and I was involved sometimes in censoring mail. That sounds cruel, but if you were in my outfit and you were gonna write a letter to your folks at home, it had to be left sealed, or it would be open. And I would read your letter. I would remove nothing from the letter except to say, if you said, I'm at Chittagong, which is a place over there, within X number of miles of the Japanese, that would be crossed out.
You couldn't say who you were?
Or if you would say, I was involved in a skirmish with the Japanese at so-and-so. You have a real heavy black pen, and that would all be crossed out. So that if the letter would never get home, and the Japanese would intercept the mail, they wouldn't have any information that you could be sending and that they could interpret. When you flew, and I received a letter from home, I would never carry that letter on my person while I'm on a plane. That had to be back, because if you went down, and I did go down several times, but if you go down and are intercepted by the Japanese, and then you have that letter from home with the address and everything, there's always that chance that through means that they have, that your parents might be approached. And so you eliminate all the possibilities of the enemy intercepting anything you have which might give them a lead or information. It was against the rules to carry them, to be honest about it.
Did you feel sad when you didn't receive as much mail, or when you couldn't be?
Oh, you would receive everything that anyone sent to you, assuming it wasn't lost in a fire or something like that. Go down, flew in the plane, go down. They would receive it. It's just there would be nothing crossed out except there would be something that would be giving information to the enemy. That's all that would be crossed out. Nothing else would be touched. And their letter might be sent to you would be, if there would be a way of them interpreting the letter. It was just a matter of protection.
Were you able to receive pictures?
No, I never received pictures, no. I don't know if anyone else could, but I don't ever remember receiving pictures.
You said that you returned home on a boat.
I did. I was supposed to fly home, but I came home on a boat.
What made you have to get on a boat?
The Army.
Yeah.
I flew to Karachi. I don't know if you know where Karachi is, but Karachi is in India on the very west, on the Indian Ocean side. And that was a distributing point. And I was to catch another plane and fly home from there. I flew in there, and I was supposed to fly home from there, but there was no means. We didn't have any. We didn't have enough ships in order to do that. So we were then told we were going home on a vessel. And I think that must have been one of Columbus's vessels, because it was the Santa Paula. A little bitty thing. And before we got aboard that thing, we had to have a flu shot.
To make sure you didn't get viruses back.
So when we got home, we wouldn't be spreading flu or something like that. Well, And they give you a piece of paper and said, don't lose that or you can't get off. You guarded that. So I went home and then by ship.
Was that the first time you've ever?
Been on a ship,
Mhm.
and I said I'd never get on another one.
How was your experience?
Well, we went through the Indian Ocean, and it was just nice and flat. Then the Red Sea, which is nice and flat. Then the Suez Canal, and we stopped at Port Said, I'm not sure if that's the correct pronunciation, and refueled, and went into the Mediterranean, and the world, we hit the Mediterranean, I'm pretty sure the world turned upside down. We went 4 days in storms.
Oh, wow.
Then we hit the Atlantic Ocean, and we had just left a Sunday school party because the Atlantic Ocean was rough, and we had 11 days straight of storms. I was on board ship 22 days, I think it was. And we got into New York Harbor, and they kept taking roll call and roll call and roll call, but wouldn't let us off. And then we'd have to go back to our quarters and they'd take roll call again. And what happened was, we lost 5 people. And they finally concluded they went overboard. They just were lost at sea. They finally let us get off, and then I went from there to a place called Camp Shanks. And then I was, the last duty I pulled, militarily, there was two tech sergeants, myself and another one, and 2 officers. And we pulled a troop train from Camp Shanks to New York, to Chicago, to Rockford. And it was amazing. It was the whole train was a troop train. And every car was absolutely massed with soldiers, except one car. The four of us had a whole railroad car to ourselves because we were pulling that duty.
Wow, that was neat.
It was unbelievable, not fair really, to all those others. But we didn't argue.
Mm-hmm.
They brought the food to us and everything.
So that was a feeling.
So that was my last duty. That was the last duty I pulled.
Did you like it?
I tell you, and then this is the first meal we went to, Camp Shanks. It was a noon meal, and a whole troop had come in from Europe. And I got in line, and there was a big buck sergeant ahead of me, and the servers were all prisoners of war, Germans.
Mm-hmm.
The buck sergeant, he put a little dab of this on there, and the buck sergeant said, put more on, fill it up. And the prisoner of war just shook his head, no. And the sergeant said to him, do you understand English? He said, yes. He said, I'm going to tell you one time. You fill that tray up like I tell you, or I'm coming over this counter and I'll kill you. And I really believe he would have. He'd just come back from Germany.
Well, we would like to take this opportunity to thank you for your years of service and tell us about your story. As you know, we'll be submitting your topic to the Library of Congress with the hope it will be arched into the collection. If arched, it will be linked to the Library of Congress, available for anyone who wants to hear your story and to see all the things that we've just learned. And we want to thank you so much again for your time, and thank you for everything.
Well, thank you. That was very special for me to be with you.
We're glad you're here.
And thank you for inviting me to this occasion.
I'm so glad you had fun.
It was special for me to meet you and be with you.
It was glad meeting you too.
So thank you.